Okay, so looks like I'm live. Welcome to another live episode of geekoutdoors.com. So what I've been trying to do is every week I'm trying to do a live episode with you, and also at the same time, if you've watched some of the other videos in the previous weeks, I've actually been starting to do live videos with my brothers and also their friends as well on Geek Bros Talk. So if you haven't seen that show, check it out as well. So this week, the three main things that I wanted to talk about are the Linux ransomware, the YouTube VR 180, and also Transformers 5 fail. So this is going to be an interesting one. So let's first start off with I think the news that I guess a lot of Linux people are interested in, myself included, is Linux ransomware. And the newest one is one called Airbus, I think it's called ERBUS. And it is, I think, one of the largest ransomware that's actually been paid out. And so for people who are not really familiar with the whole idea of ransomware software, you know, they've probably heard of WannaCry and previously about a month ago that happened on Windows and even on some Linux machines as well. And what ransomware is once this particular piece of software gets into your system, it encrypts all your data. And when it does that, obviously you can't get into your own data. And the only way that you can get it unencrypted is to pay ransomware. And then that is paid through Bitcoin. And then if it's, I guess if they wanted to, if they agreed to it, then they will send you the keys, the password to actually unencrypt the data that you have. And this is, you know, year over year, it's becoming a real serious thing because as anybody remembers from the recent WannaCry event, that affected hospitals. You know, it has a real serious impact. And things such as this, you know, which are more advanced in terms of a type of damage they could do, it's going to be more and more prevalent over the years. And so most of the times when we hear about these things, whether it's viruses, malware, security issues, normally it's in the Windows world, okay? And as everybody knows, Windows is the largest desktop operating system, but Windows is also in the server arena as well, and they're also in the mobile space. So normally when we think about Windows, we're thinking of the desktop, okay, laptops. And then when we think about Linux, normally most people are thinking of servers, okay, specifically web servers. And so a lot of times, us being Linux users, we do tout the security features of Linux and how it is built underneath. It is secure underneath. However, as with any particular system, no system is 100% invulnerable to attacks. And so that's what happened here. And so what happened was a web hosting company in Korea was actually hit by this ransomware. And let me see if I can get the exact news. It is called Erebus, EREBUS. And so the whole ransomware actually got into their hosting servers, and what it did was it actually encrypted data that was actually on 153 Linux servers, and it actually affected 3,400 customers' websites, and that's pretty bad, you know. And then if you are a Linux user and you're thinking about this, you're like, wow, maybe Linux is not as secure as you thought. And you know, servers, they do get hacked almost every single day, you know, and a lot of times the servers that are being attacked are normally web servers, and web servers are normally Linux servers, okay? Now, if you are a system admin, you would have way more details on how security works there. I myself am not a system admin. However, I have been an Oracle DBA before, and I worked in production environments, and so I have a good understanding of how it actually runs, you know, what actual servers are and how it works with all the client systems that we have. But in this case, and you know, if there are any system admins that want to comment below or even jump in, is the fact that whenever servers, they do get compromised, specifically things such as web servers, Linux web servers, normally it's due to the system not being patched or running on older versions, normally, but not always. And so in this case, that's exactly what happened here. And so, or at least from the research that was done by I think Trend Micro. Trend Micro makes antivirus and they do security software. And so what they're saying is, it looks like, as for how, and this is in quotes by the way, so it says, as for how this Linux ransomware arrives, we can only infer that Erebus may have possibly leveraged vulnerabilities or a local Linux exploit. And some of the things that they saw was that Nyana is actually the name of the hosting company in Korea. And they said that the website actually runs on Linux kernel 2.6.24.2. And that is a really old version, and that was compiled back in 2008. And let me see which version of the kernel that I have, and that is a really old version of the kernel. So let's see what I got. System software, okay. And so it's going to take me a second. So let me see. Summary. And so the version of the kernel that I have on Linux 18.1 is, the kernel is Linux version 3.19.0. So that's a pretty old version of the kernel, so that's what they have. And then another thing is that they saw that the version of Apache that they use, which is Apache version 1.3.36 and also PHP version 5.1.4, was actually released way back in 2006. All right, Rose is on here. Hey, what's going on, Rose? Rose asks, how come system admins don't update their software to prevent these attacks? Okay, and Rose, I definitely want to address that. I do want to talk about that, just going based upon my own corporate experience to kind of, in my opinion, kind of explain why that's the case. Okay, so from what I could see here, yeah, that was the main reason why they were compromised, because the versions of the Linux kernel, the version of Apache was actually a lot older, as you could already tell. And them paying $1 million in Bitcoins, actually the actual people who created the ransomware, I think they actually wanted like $3 million at the beginning until they negotiated down to $1 million. And I think that's one of the largest ever paid out. And in the Linux world, I mean, I'm not mistaken, I think that's the largest ever paid out for ransomware. At least that's publicly known. If there's anybody who knows one that's higher, you can correct me there. And so for people who really use Linux and really espouse all the security features of Linux, which I still feel Linux is definitely more secure from the kernel level all the way up. However, when things like this happen, and then Linux web servers are usually the ones that are attacked, then it kind of makes you feel like, whoa, is Linux really secure? And it is. Now, to go back to the whole ransomware thing, even if they paid out the ransomware, right, and they provided the keys, there's no guarantees that the keys they provide are going to work. And there's no guarantees, I'm pretty sure the company's going to check this, that your data has not also been corrupted. Or actually they've been injected with more things. You know what I mean? That could always happen. And so that's something that I don't look forward to as these, I guess, kind of attacks get more advanced and they really affect things that are important and critical, such as the hospitals before, and then to this case, something like hosting. Okay, so now let me go ahead and answer that question. Let me see what Rose said. Why don't have data backups, making data backups each day? Yeah, and that's a huge thing with ransomware is, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Rose, because whenever people do get attacked, and even big companies, I mean, you've seen all the attacks, cyber attacks, DDoS attacks that's happened over the years. I'm actually shocked that these big companies don't have some type of backups, and if they did have backups, it would not be the most recent version, or like it would be a lot older, like months older. So why don't people do that? For big companies, I have absolutely I don't understand why they don't do that. I mean, especially this is customers' data, and especially, when you think things about like the health, right? The hospital, when it is attacked by WannaCry, you should have backups, especially for institutions that handle things like hospitals, okay, or government-related stuff, things like that. It's essential, And then for things like this, you have web hosting. You need data backups, And so I still don't understand that part of it. I think the number one thing would be, at least for most companies, is cost. Okay, because if you're backing up, going back to my corporate experience, it's expensive. Okay, not only do you have to have the hardware to run it, okay, like for example, in a corporate system, a lot of times we had these large Unix servers, right? And then they were in multiple different RAID setups, okay, RAID 0, RAID 0.1, and they would need a lot of, I would say, maintenance from really experienced, not only system admins, but database administrators, and also they need an application team as well, if in case there are failures. And so for companies, it's nowhere near as easy and nowhere near as cheap as it is with an individual, okay? And if you work at any corporate company, that's one of the reasons why I feel that if they don't have recent backups, that's why. It's because they didn't invest the money and also for the people and the expertise to do it. Because I've been in companies where we have things called SLAs, which is it's a service level agreement with your clients, where you have to have a certain amount of uptime, and the majority of uptime for most companies is going to be like 99%. Okay, and so they have standard level agreements. And so when you do things like that, you are contractually obligated to have a very thorough plan, and you have to show these to the companies of how you not only would keep their data secure, but really also the uptime, okay, the backup, recovery, and then you would have a lot of things like you would have failover servers, okay, you would have like normally in an environment you might have 3 different Unix servers or Linux servers. Most of the times it's Unix servers, and I'm going to explain that more in a little bit, but they would have 3 different servers. One would be your production servers, and this is just one example, okay? Other companies can have way more complex. You would have your main server, with your main database, which is your production database, and then you would have a second one, which is your failover, okay? Which would basically be a copy of that one, okay? And if they can afford it, they'll buy another server for that. If they can't afford another server, then they'll just they'll partition out or have separate drives just for the backup server. And so when that happens, they have the second failover server, which is a duplicate, and then they'll also have a third server or a third environment, which is basically your development and testing environment. So that's been my experience, and now this kind of goes into your question, Rose, where you were asking like why don't system admins update their software in these companies, okay? And the reason why goes back to what I just said earlier. It's primarily cost, okay? And once again, if you think about it, not from the individual, for us, backing up is way easier, and still a lot of people don't do it, backing ups on us could be something like, for me, I'll use a separate external hard drive, and also I have USB sticks as well, and also you can still use optical drives as well, such as, your DVDs to back things up. So I back up regularly, but a lot of people don't. And then when it comes to the business level, so let's go ahead and talk about kind of going to the whole complexity of doing it. And so why don't system admins update this, okay? And the reason why is, number one, actually no, it's the exact same reasons as the other: cost, time, and also whenever you do updates, think about it this way: we have one computer, right? I'm just giving an example. And in corporate systems, a lot of times, like their version of Windows, it's not the most recent. And you're wondering, why don't they update to the most recent version? Well, if you only have one machine, or even 4 or 5, that's not a problem. But when you have a company where you have thousands of computers to update with hundreds of different applications that work with it, and that could break if you update things, and then also you have customers on the other end that are using your systems 24/7. So that's why in businesses, they normally do not have the latest version of software, whether it's the kernel, whether it's the Apache web server, whether it's Microsoft Office, that's the reason why. Because especially a lot of these businesses, they have on-site in-house programs that they built themselves. So this isn't something that you could just go out and buy. And a lot of these applications and everything that surrounds it, they're like expensive. The first company I worked with, we dealt with airlines. okay, transportation. And the software that they're selling to these other companies are like $1, 2, 3 million. And that's not even including the ongoing costs. And so if you always wanted to update to the most recent version, but it breaks something, then you are going to have a lot of trouble with your clients, especially whenever you have a system that is down or you have inaccurate data. Your company can be sued. They can be sued, and you could lose millions and millions of dollars. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Rose. That's the reason why if you go to most companies, they don't have the most recent software. They don't have the latest version. And even though it's a security issue, you know, like why wouldn't you have the most secure version of this software to patch things? And that's why, you know, there's cost, there's lots of complexities. And, you know, if you've ever worked in a corporate environment, it's absolutely amazing how many things are broken, how many things are not updated, how many places where, you know, you don't have accurate documentation. And so a lot of the things that we see as consumers on the other end, we don't actually see the chaos that's going on behind it. And if there's anybody here who's actually worked in IT and actually worked behind the scenes in production and stuff, I think they would agree with me, you know. And in terms of the, when I was a DBA back then, I really enjoyed working with the system admins, because the system admins, they just like, they had a different way of thinking. You know, like sometimes, you know, you'll go down to the server room and it's just quiet down there. It's just them and all the servers. And sometimes I don't even realize that they're there. Yeah. Hey, no problem, Rose. Yeah. Yeah. So Rose is saying, will this ransomware attack new kernels for recent new releases? As far as I know, no. Okay. Because the reason why it seems this one worked, because it had older version of the Linux kernel and also an older version of Apache web server, which actually did have known exploits, you know, which have been since patched by newer versions of this. Okay, and so that's as far as I know. And you know, if you're a Linux user, the one thing that I love about it is normally when you do get updates, and this is similar to Unix as well, you could install a lot of these updates without having to restart your machine. Now obviously if it's a kernel update, then normally you have to, okay? But depending on the way you have your system set up, especially in a server environment, then you could mitigate that as well. And going back to my story about when I was a DBA, the system admins, like sometimes I wouldn't even know that they were working because they're in their own office down there, and there could be multiple system admins, and you don't even hear them, you know. That's kind of weird. And that's not all system admins, you know. But then when things would go wrong, oh man, the system admins, you would hear from them constantly, you know, from emails, from communication, you know. And when I was a DBA, when we had issues where we had production systems, you know, this isn't something new if you've ever worked in IT. Production systems go down, everybody's on high alert. You know, everybody's scrambling, and you, as much as possible, you have to follow protocols. You know, it's just not like, oh wait, I know what the fix is. This is the reason why this application is failing. Let me go ahead and put in a fix. No, you're gonna have to go through the whole process of actually getting it escalated. Okay, and then you have to deal with operations, and then you might have to deal with the business end as well, because once again, as I discussed a little earlier, you have these SLA agreements. Then you have to deal with the implementation or system support team. Then you also have to schedule the time to actually do these upgrades, and even before you do it, you need to do testing as well. That's why we have test servers and so forth. Okay, and so it's a very, very complex thing. And so yeah, so Linux ransomware, that's not cool at all. I mean, when I saw this, I was like, oh man, this is not good for Linux users. But then when you think about why it happened, it's common. You know, that's how Linux web servers most of the times they get attacked, because they don't have a patch version. I guess they have versions that don't have the security exploits plugged. Okay, and normally in a business environment, this is normally the setup. Okay, because a lot of times we think Windows, when it comes to servers, oh no, Linux is where it's at. Okay, but that's simply not the case in a real corporate environment. Normally, this is normally the environment that you have for your servers, your most critical items. you normally have Unix servers. Okay, that's normally what it is. It's Unix servers for your most critical items. Okay, second to that, a lot of people and businesses use Windows. Okay, that's a fact. And so a lot of the people who work on their machines that they're provided by the companies run on Windows. And so with that being said, a lot of the servers that are used to work with all the the computers, it would be a Windows servers. Okay, so a lot of times you would have an environment where your client systems are Windows machines, and then your servers where all the file sharing, it would be Windows based. Okay, and that makes sense. It's a lot easier for compatibility, and also you have a lot of software that runs obviously on Windows, and a lot of these companies use Windows based software. So you could have like a Windows server that would do virtualization. It would be like a virtual remote desktop, and then your machines would be pretty much like thin clients. They would be like dumb terminals. They really won't have much in there, and they would just have basic computing, and then they would log into this virtual machine, which would be a server, and then everybody would work off of that one machine. So that not only reduces cost in terms of your hardware, but also, as you know, in Windows there's licensing fees involved, and it's also per user. And so that's really how businesses are set up. They're normally Unix for your critical stuff, Unix servers, Windows servers to work with all the Windows clients. Okay, and then if you do have Linux servers, normally it's going to be for web services, okay, or web hosting. Okay, so that is really the reality of how companies are set up. So whenever I think about Linux servers, I do think mainly about Linux web servers. And the other types of servers, they're normally going to be Unix or Windows. Okay, so that's my thoughts on this whole Linux ransomware. And I didn't really do a deep dive on how many Linux only ransomware there are out there, but I'm pretty sure, just like our Windows desktops, there's not as many as there are on Windows. It's just that whenever we hear about these web server attacks, it's usually Linux related, okay, because most of them run on Linux. Okay, so that's it for that particular topic. So let's move on to something new that Google just introduced at VidCon. Okay, and VR. Okay, so I have my really cheapy VR headset. I did do a review on this, so I'll leave it somewhere up here. But this, I think it's like, I got it for like $15 US, or maybe it's 20, I can't remember, but you could get this for $10. And I also have my LG VR camera as well. And so, as anybody knows, on YouTube, they provide VR. If you have something like this, or a Google Cardboard, or their new Google Daydream, or the Samsung VR headset, you know that YouTube has provided VR for a while. But if you've ever tried 360, I think it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's why I got this. I just wanted to get a taste of it, and I'm actually amazed by the type of experience that you get with it. So you can look around 360 degrees. But the problem with it is, number one, the resolution is not as high, okay? And then number two, if you've ever looked at 360 on YouTube, it has this fisheye effect, and that's mainly because of the technology of 360 degree cameras. So this one is not an expensive one. I think this is $200, but 360 degree cameras with very high resolution lenses, they could go up into the thousands, and not a lot of people can afford that, okay? And also the overall experience, like I was saying with 360, at least right now, it's just not the best experience. It looks great, like you could turn around, it's kind of like you're there, but it's still not, like, fidelity wise, it's still not as good as you just watching it on, without 3D. Okay, so Google is actually changing that. So what they've done is they've introduced YouTube VR 180. And I haven't tested it yet. I just read this news. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test it out on this later on, and I might do my reaction on it as well. But I did watch the VR 180 video, just without the VR headset. And if you haven't seen it, you could type it in YouTube VR, and it's like this video of this father and his son doing this rubber band thing. It's kind of cool. And so, so the whole point of the VR 180 is, obviously by the name, it's VR 180. So that's half of VR 360. So ideally from this, you will get higher resolutions. And that's the whole thing with VR. You know, the resolution is very important. And so if you look at things like the HTC VR or the Oculus Rift VR, there's a reason why they cost more than something like the PlayStation VR, or that it costs so much more than something like this, okay? And the reason being is because, number one, the resolution on the screens is much higher, the refresh rate is better, and you know, it's just an overall better experience. But it really comes to the fidelity, okay? And so, yeah, so when will you become part of the board? I don't know, I think I already am part of the board. So with the VR 180, they're saying they're going to give you a lot higher resolution because of the fact that it's half of it. So the good thing is you're going to get a higher resolution experience, okay? But the bad thing is you're only getting 180, so you won't be able to look behind you, but you will be able to look left and right. And also it will improve 3D as well, your 3D experience, because of the increased fidelity. But you know, I'm not sure yet until I try it myself. And so with this type of news, you know, VR is something that every company is really, I would say, not maybe doing actively, but they are invested in it because, you know, VR has been around, oh man, I remember since the 80s, you know, and probably it's been around even before that. And if anybody remembers game companies, even like as early as, what, the Sega Master System? Or the Sega Master System or the Sega Genesis, I can't remember. They had a VR headset plan, you know, where Jaguar had a VR headset. That was horrible. I don't think that was ever released. And then even of course, the Virtual Boy had a VR headset, you know, and that was an absolutely mind-numbing experience. So VR has been around for a long time. At least they've been trying. The industry has been trying to push it, but every single time that they've tried this, it's always limited by the technology and also the overall experience. You know, I mean, there's more VR content now than there was back then, but people still don't use it as much because, I mean, I would always think that the experience is very important. Like even with this VR stuff, I get dizzy, you know, and that's not a good experience. I don't care if it has like the best graphics in the world. If I get dizzy and nauseous after playing VR, I'm probably not going to go back to it, you know. And then obviously, you know, you need to have compelling content that makes you want to use VR. And so as we're going further, I know VR is going to be used more and more. But my feeling on this, what Google's doing, it's smart, okay? Normally, Google tries a lot of different things, you know, and normally they're at the forefront of trying out new things. And in a sense where they did it through YouTube first, which is a massive site, as you all know. There's lots of people who watch it all the time. They're also doing a lot of beta testing with this as well. Okay, and so I think it's great that Google is doing this and on a platform that all of us are familiar with. And at the same time, it will also allow content creators like myself and like whoever else that do YouTube that we will be able to do this VR 180. And if I remember correctly, you know, you could do the VR 180 just using your phone, you know. I have to make sure that's correct, but I think that's what it is. So you don't have to, you don't have to buy, it says you don't have to buy any special equipment or editing tools. It says for content creators, there wouldn't be need for any special equipment or editing tools for making VR 180 videos. Okay. However, you know, these companies, YouTube is working with other companies like Lenovo or LG, like the little camera I just showed you, that they will be offering more VR specific cameras, just like that, just like this LG VR here. But what Google's going to do is they're going to make it like certified, okay, certified to work with YouTube, VR 180, you know, VR 360, and so forth. Okay, so that's kind of like the seal of approval. So when you see these Google certified VR headsets, then you'll know that technically you should get the best experience. And also, you know, these are going to be way cheaper than it would be if you got the actual VR equipment. Okay, and so Rose is asking, it probably would take another 10 years perhaps with VR technology to give people a good experience. You know, I would agree with you, Rose. I really do. I mean, and once again, if go back to like my own experience, since the 80s, I mean, up until now, that's like a long time. You know, it's taken that long because it's not an easy thing. Okay, it's just not. Okay, now another reason why I think what Rose was saying, in another 10 years that it will become more prevalent, because we are used to seeing VR, not just in movies and stuff like that, but augmented reality. You know, I think most people are familiar with it. You know, like Pokemon Go, right? That uses augmented reality. So that is a form of 3D, you know, because it's in a virtual environment and there's an object right there. And so, in my opinion, if anything, I really feel VR in augmented reality is going to become way more popular and more useful to people than VR with headsets. That's really my opinion, okay? Because like Pokemon Go, that's a real world use. I could actually see you using a VR environment in the real world, and it makes sense, okay? And on top of it, I'm not getting dizzy trying on this VR headset, you know? And so, yeah, so whenever more content creators, I really feel in terms of VR content, I'm glad I got my VR headset, my VR camera, but I don't think VR for content creators, it's there, you know, yet. I mean, even right now, a lot of content creators are just now starting to do 4K stuff. I myself, I don't see the need yet, but I will start doing more 4K stuff, which means I'm going to have to get better equipment, you know. And also, maybe next year, I think, you know, next year you probably will see more content creators create more VR related things. Okay, maybe like the end of 2018, VR content on YouTube, and not just on YouTube, maybe on Facebook Live, on Instagram, Snapchat. It's going to be normal for you to have VR content. Okay, so we got another person here. Let me see. So Arik Mars says, hey, what's up, Aris? Hi, sometimes I just want to sit down and stare forwards, not spinning around 360. So I think this is good to consume as well as good to produce, and that would help VR to spread. Yes, I completely agree with you, Arik. And it kind of goes back to what I just said earlier. I think like as VR becomes more mainstream, and I think 2018, maybe late 2018, you would see more VR content. You know, because at that point, people are used to it. I think there's going to be way more content, not only from us, but from bigger companies. And at the same time, the content will be of a higher quality. And hopefully, they would have figured out better technologies to where the majority of people don't get dizzy. Or, like, for example, okay, and maybe this is not the best example, okay, but like this headset, right? And most VR headsets, they're not small. Even the Daydream one, you know, you still feel it on your head. And this is one that's heavy, okay? So it's not heavy when you put it on, but if you're in a VR experience and you're on there for like 4 to 5 hours, yeah, you're going to feel it. I mean, even if you are used to VR, you know, and obviously systems like the Oculus, HTC Vive, and PlayStation VR, they are designed better to where you can keep them on longer, but still, I mean, if you think about yourself, if you play video games, right? If you ever tried VR gaming, what's the longest that you've ever played? You know, I'm pretty sure it's not as long as if you were just playing a game not in VR. And so they still have to work things out. But just from my perspective as a content creator, you know, having VR, I'm going to do more VR episodes. I just have to find like environments that are interesting. You know, I don't want to shoot VR in my room, and that's just kind of boring. But, you know, it allows you a lot of, I would say, a lot of flexibility in your content creation. You know, you could be more creative with it. And you could also take people along for the experiences. That's what I love about VR. Because when I shot this on my camera the first time, and I was like, and then I watched it myself, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I could actually look all around and I could feel that I'm there, you know. And with things like VR 180, even though I can't look all the way around, if the fidelity is going to be better and I'm going to get a better 3D experience as well, yeah, it's going to be awesome. And so I really feel VR, in this case as well, it will allow you to create content that is more creative, that allows people to be more immersed into what you're trying to show, you know. Especially if you are the type of person who travels a lot, You know, that would be awesome. Or maybe even for stuff like this, geeky technology stuff, I could see using VR. Like say I'm doing a PC build, right? It'd be really cool for me to take the VR camera and go actually inside the actual machine itself as I'm building it, so like people can get a feel of how it's working. Or maybe like when my computer's on, like say if you built a PC and then it had a lot of cool lights and it had an awesome water cooling system and you had super silent fans and that stuff that you would geek out over. Well, what if you put your VR camera, a high resolution VR camera, and then you would put that inside the machine? That would just look awesome. Okay, and so yeah, so those are my thoughts on YouTube VR 180 and just VR in general. Hey, what's going on, Carl? That would be cool. Yes, that would be very cool. And so I might do an episode on that actually. So if I maybe because I've already built my PC, you know, and I'm not like a PC builder, so you probably won't see many PC builds. But maybe on an episode, I might just take my VR camera and just go inside my machine. I want to see it too because I've never done it, so that might be a cool thing, you know. And then like maybe other content creators, like if they had like some old computer hardware, that would be cool. You know, like I have some old, I have an old desktop there, but say like you had, I don't know, like something bigger. I can't really think what that would be right now. Or maybe if you like cars, like old cars or something, you know, the whole VR experience that actually makes a difference. And anyway, I could talk about, actually this is so funny, all of us are talking more about VR than I thought. I didn't think we'd have a long discussion on VR. So yeah, so YouTube VR 180, I think it's a really great idea, not only for people who are consuming our content, but also for the people who are actually creating the content. It's going to be pretty sweet. And so the last thing that I had on my schedule of things to talk about is Transformers 5. Yes. Oh, Transformers 5. Okay, so I know this is a hotly debated topic amongst, well, pretty much everybody. It's all over the news, and every time a new Transformers movie comes out, yeah, Carl, it is up to 5. Transformers: The Last Night is number 5. I can't believe it. And normally there's always controversy surrounding Transformers, and most of the times it's bad. Okay, like for myself personally, I absolutely enjoy Transformers 1. I am a huge Transformers fan. I mean, I'm not as huge of a fan as some people that know every single character, they know alternate storylines, they have all the toys and so forth. But I grew up watching Transformers. You know, obviously it wasn't the Japanese version, the original, which was way more violent, and I think the Japanese versions are always cooler. And so when it came out in the US or in North America, obviously it was dubbed, it was edited in some cases, but it was just so cool. I mean, when I first saw Optimus Prime, okay, Gaza said watching now, it's a comedic romp. What's going on, Gaza? Oh, you're watching Transformers 5 now. Great, awesome, jeez. So, yeah, so when I was a kid, when I first saw Optimus Prime, I was just like, man, that looks so awesome. And then when I saw Megatron turn into a gun, that didn't make any sense. He's like super huge, and then he turned into a gun. And then some of my favorite characters, I love Soundwave. I actually bought the toys. I had Optimus Prime, I had Soundwave, I had Starscream. I definitely had Megatron because it was cool. He turned into a gun. I had Bumblebee. I had Hot Rod, and I also had, there was another character, I can't remember, I think it was Jetstream. So he looked like a Robotech Transformer. It was cool. And obviously I had the Dinobots as well. And I even had the Devastators, you know, which was in Transformers 2. All the construction robots, the Decepticons, and then they would come together to form one big one. And Transformers, along with that, along with GoBots, which is, I think, like the poor version of Transformers, and also, of course, Voltron, Robotech, you know, it was all together, and I absolutely loved those when I was a kid. And that was one of the main reasons why I loved anime so much is because that was really my first introduction to anime. And I think for a lot of people, you know, if you're young or if you're old enough to remember that, that's obviously most people's first experience with animation. Because back then, anime wasn't a big thing. It was called Japanimation. And, you know, you would get them in VHS tapes and they didn't come out very often, you know, except for the mainstream ones that I just talked about. So anyway, with all of that being said, when I heard that there was a Transformers movie and when I watched it, I was just like, this is awesome. And the most important thing about the first Transformers was it was fun. It was so much fun, even though it really wasn't related at all to the cartoons or the manga. It was fun. I absolutely enjoyed the first Transformers. Okay, now with that being said, everything after that, especially Transformers 2, I hated that movie. Oh my God, I hated that movie so much. There's been very few movies that I wanted to walk out of the theater. And you know, when I saw that Devastron was going to be on there, I'm like, yes, I had the toy when I was a kid. And anybody remembers that movie? That was an absolutely horrible movie. They're just going from place to place. The Fallen made no sense. It was absolutely stupid. And then the third one, God, that was horrible too. Not as bad as part 2, but you get the idea. And after the third one, I just didn't want to watch anymore. So I didn't watch number 4, Age of Extinction, which had Dinobots, or maybe a little bit of Dinobots. I just didn't want to watch it. And now number 5, I don't want to watch it neither. You know, I might watch it, but I don't. I really do not want to watch it. The only reason I'd watch it is to do a review on it, so then I could post a review. But there's tons of reviews out there, and I don't know. I absolutely don't know how it ended up this way. But the unfortunate thing is, these movies make billions, make billions of dollars, especially in China. Okay, so current box office right now, domestically, at least here in the North America, or in the US specifically, it doesn't look like The Weeknd is even going to make $70 million. That's what they're trending right now. And for a Transformers movie, that's not good. You know, this will actually make less than Age of Extinction. But, you know, as it has been for a while now, when it comes to movies, it's not the US only that's important. And as a matter of fact, the most important market, as everybody knows, is China. You know, China is the most important market when it comes to movies. There's over 1 billion people there. And I remember reading somewhere, there's like a new mega theater open like 2 every day in China. So China market is huge. And if I remember correctly, I think a Chinese company actually owns AMC theaters and Cinemark, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I might be wrong on that, but that's what I remember. And so the movie audience is way bigger than just the United States and North America, obviously. You know, you have your Canadian audiences, you have your European markets, you have your other Asian markets, you know, Japan and so forth. You have your South American market. And so there is a lot of money there. And so a lot of times, whenever these studios are putting out movies, they're thinking US is important, but they're more concerned about how much money they're making elsewhere, specifically China. So in this case, once again, that's what Transformers is betting on. They're betting on the Chinese market. And so far, it's done well in China, I think. Let me see what it's made so far. $41 million Friday debut in China. That's quite a bit. So, let me see. Yeah, 2/3. Okay. Now, it is trending to do not as good as Age of Extinction. And yeah, so domestically, Age of Extinction, the last time it came out, it was $250 million domestically, but internationally it made more than $1 billion. Jeez, that's a crazy amount of money. And that's not including whatever they make from the toys, okay? And I think a lot of people know that really that's what this Transformers franchise is all about. It's meant to sell the toys. So the movies, of course, they make a lot of money, but they make more money out of toys, out of any other deals that they make with other companies, and then with any other residual sales that they make out of products or services, or even if they do something like open up a you know, like a theme park, you know, like at Universal Studios or something, or at Disneyland or so forth. You know, there's a lot of places where this franchise makes a ton of money outside of just movies. Okay, and so am I gonna watch Transformers 5? Yeah, it is Michael Bay after all, yeah. Okay, oh, I'm sorry. So some other person jumped in. Anox Man. Hey, what's up, Anox Man? What are first things to do after the installation of Linux Mint? Well, I'm not sure. We might get into that just a little bit, Anox Man. So I do try to talk about Linux related items on every single video. And I did initially talk about Linux ransomware. So let me see. Gaza says, do you think that our expectations are too high for a film like this? It's Michael Bay after all. You know, Gaza, that's a really good point. I don't hate Michael Bay. Actually, one of my favorite movies are made by Michael Bay because they're fun, okay? Armageddon, The Rock, Bad Boys 1, and especially Bad Boys 2. Man, those were really fun movies. And the problem with the Transformers movies, except for number one, is they're not fun. That's the problem, you know? And I don't know. I mean, I think Michael Bay, he's not, none of these people doing this, they're not idiots. Okay, but at the same time, it's like, okay, since you have this much money, this much talent, why don't you actually try to make a movie that's good, that I don't want to walk out of? Because after watching Transformers 2 and what I remember of Transformer 3, I purposely forgot it's such a horrible experience. It actually made me tired. I don't know if you feel the same way, but when I got out of watching Transformers 2, I was exhausted. You know, and I absolutely love watching movies. If you've seen from my channel, I have a lot of a lot of videos of movie, anime reviews, foreign films. I absolutely love movies. But when I get out of a movie and I'm exhausted, and on top of it, I feel like I hated what I just saw, and I hate myself for watching it. That's a problem. And Carl says, yes. Yes, so you felt tired as well. It's like, man, that's not a good experience. Okay, so, yeah, Carl says the action sequences were way too long. That's right, you know, and that's so funny because Michael Bay, man, that guy is a talented director. I don't care what people say. When it comes to visual elements, visual storytelling, the look and everything else, he's a master at it. Okay, it looks awesome. True Living Southern Organics, True. Hey, what's up, True Living? Yeah, and yeah, it's true. He is a master of the visual element. And when he wants to make a movie that's really good and fun, if he sticks on that, he can make that. I don't know how many times I've watched Armageddon or Bad Boys 2. I mean, Bad Boys 2, okay, if you think about this premise, okay, I don't know why I'm talking about Bad Boys 2. Maybe I enjoyed that movie so much. This is where it's fun and it has beauty and there's action. Okay, so let me give you some elements that I remember. The funniest scene in Bad Boys 2 that I remember all the time is when Martin Lawrence, his daughter's about to go on a date with this kid. And then the kid comes knocking on the door, and Martin Lawrence and Will Smith's character, they just scared the crap out of this kid. And that was so funny. I mean, it's absolutely funny. And so by the end of the scene, you were just laughing, but for a good reason, you know? And then in that same movie, Bad Boys 2, the action scenes where they're just driving really fast in exotic cars in Miami or whatever the location, man, you're excited. There's tension there. There's like cars rolling around, and there's guns firing everywhere, and there's humor on top of it, and it looks absolutely amazing. And so, yeah, True Living Southern Organic said, you ever seen a grown man naked? You want to? That's right. I love that scene. And that's actually a scene from Bad Boys 2 when Martin Lawrence is done like beating down this young teenager. And then Will Smith's character comes and he says he's just got out of jail, right? And that's when he spits that line. Oh man, that was so funny. Yeah, so going back to the action, man, if you watch just Bad Boys 2, that scene where they're out in the interstate and they're chasing these guys, there's just so much stuff going on, but it's fun, and you can still see what's going on, okay? Whereas in the Transformers movie, and it's completely the opposite of that. If you think about it like objectively, there's way more action in these Transformers movies. There just is. There's robots fighting each other. There's Galvatron, is it Galvatron or Unicron? Yeah, like, you got Cybertron coming down on Unicron Earth. You know, it's coming down that planet. Okay, that's a spoiler, by the way. But, you know, and things like that, it should be more awesome, right? You know, you have flying Transformers turning into robots. It should be more awesome. But it's simply not. It's actually boring, and by the time it's all done, I didn't know what I was looking at. And I, much like the characters, I'm exhausted from the fight. And maybe, I'm pretty sure he did that on purpose. And so whenever I watch a Transformers movie, I think like many others were just thinking like, why am I watching, why did I watch that? And why am I watching the next version of the series? So Gaza says, I'm in the cinema watching it right now. Oh, God, thanks, Gaza. He said he'd rather watch me on the video. That's, you know what? If you'd rather watch my video versus the movie that you're watching, thank you, first of all. And secondly, that must be an absolutely horrible movie for you not wanting to pay attention to the movie that you're watching. And so Transformers 5, it is technically, they're saying it's Michael Bay's last movie. And once again, I love Michael Bay as a director, okay? When he's given the type of movies or that he wants to make that are fun, like I said, Bad Boys 2, The Rock, Armageddon, those type of movies, then that's where he shines. But when he's doing things like Transformers, and honestly, the Lamer Linux, hello all, hey, what's up, the Lamer Linux, awesome name by the way. And you know, when I think Michael Bay, and I think a lot of people agree with this, okay? He's making these Transformers movies because he's getting paid tons of money. And honestly, I think he's even said it before, like so many people were like criticizing him, and he was like, you know what, we could put anything out there and people will watch it. And he's absolutely right. And so I think in a lot of ways, this is kind of just like a F you to everybody who criticized him. And he's been doing this since Transformers 2. So he'll put out the worst type of movie that he can make because we've seen him do way better things. We know that. And people still go and watch it. So he's proven his point. And so I hope that he doesn't come back for another Transformers movie. And that I really hope that he goes back and makes a type of movies that are better suited for him, the type of movies that he wants to make. He did do another movie, Pain and Gain. It was a smaller movie, 50 million. That's small for Michael Bay, which actually had Mark Wahlberg in it as well. I didn't watch that. But, you know, I think Michael Bay, he's like worth like $500-something million, so he doesn't have to work. But hopefully he will go back to the type of movies that not only that he does best, but that he also enjoys. I would love to see a Bad Boys 3, and everybody's been wanting that movie to come out forever. I really, really want Martin Lawrence and Will Smith to come back, so it's going to be awesome. So Rose says, sorry, I have not seen any Transformers after the first one. Good. Don't watch any other movies after the first Transformers. All of us who have seen more than the first Transformers, all of us, I think, were traumatized. We're still tired, and we're still confused. It was just absolute mess. I can't tell you what the storylines of these are. And then from Transformers 5, they said it's the same thing. There's so many different storylines. So maybe I might go watch, I'm sorry, man, my brain is so messed up from Transformers. I might go watch it. I might go watch it if I really hate myself that day. I might go see it. Now Carl says he's seen it. You're not missing much. Awesome. Okay, and so those are all my three main topics, okay? Normally what I like to do, at least with these live episodes that I have been doing so far weekly, is I like to focus on three main topics, okay? So today it was the Linux ransomware, it was YouTube VR 180, and it was Transformers 5 fail. And then what I want to do now, I usually like to have a bonus stuff where we kind of like talk about stuff. And most time we'll probably talk about Linux stuff. And so Rose is asking, it's almost the same as the remake of The Mummy. Yeah, that would look like crap. I'm sorry. I don't. Tom Cruise is in there just for the paycheck. And so Trey, hey, what's going on? Wow, awesome. So let's go ahead and go to the question. I think let's talk about some Linux stuff, okay? And obviously the people watching this, they know a little something about Linux. So Anoxman asks, what are the first things to do after the installation of Linux? And in general, okay, the first thing you want to do whenever you install Linux is you want to go to your update manager. You want to go to your update manager and then download and install any system updates that you had. Okay, whether it's OS update or whether it's software updates. I think that is the very first thing that you should do. Yeah, Carl says software repository. Yeah, so it is the software repository. So yeah, so if you go on this little symbol here, and I'm pretty sure you can find it. You know, you just look here, and then it'll tell you how many updates are available, and then also how large the updates are. And Clayton Coffee says sudo pacman SYU. Yeah, and so that's the first thing you should do, okay? And then secondly, after that is, I recommend that you go to your administration and then go to driver manager. Okay, let me open that up. And hopefully my phone, I'm doing this through my phone because it's a lot easier. And so if it starts to die, then I'll have to end the episode or plug it into the wall. Let me see. So if you go to your driver manager, and if you've never used Linux before, I think Anoxman, you have used Linux before, but for all the people who've never used Linux before, these are kind of like the main steps, and I think it's a lot easier to do than in Windows. In Windows, you have to do a lot more setup, in my opinion. It has become easier though, don't get me wrong, it's become easier than it has been before. So the second thing I do is I would log into my driver manager and check to see if there are drivers for your particular machine. Now, what's great about the Linux driver management is once you log in, Linux Mint will actually look at your hardware and find compatible drivers. And I know Windows does that as well, and so does Mac, but I think it's a lot easier through Linux. And so it's updating it right now, it's updating the cache. And so it'll log into the archive Ubuntu repositories or their servers and actually look to see if there's any compatible drivers that works with your particular hardware. And so once that comes up, what it's normally going to do is it's going to show you some compatible drivers, and the majority of times it's going to show non-proprietary drivers, okay, open source drivers. That's first and foremost. And then if there are some proprietary drivers, it'll show that as well, okay. Like there's normally, I think that when you do update it, like I had one for the Intel drivers for my CPU, and I can't remember if that was proprietary or not. But once you do that, I think for most people, yeah, so like right here, I know you can't see the screen, but it says AMD, okay, so it does have a proprietary driver, but you can also use the recommended Xserver XOR video drivers, open source, and so that's meant for video, okay? But in this case, you see these drivers, right? You can use the open source compatible drivers, or like myself, I have the AMD RX 470 GPU, and this one also has an AMD chipset. And so AMD has been pretty good about producing drivers for Linux. So in that case, I would go ahead and download and install the AMD specific drivers for Linux. Okay, so just to recap, the first thing I do, system updates. The second thing I would do is go to your driver manager and make sure that you have drivers that are compatible with your hardware, okay? Now, after that, honestly, if I had to be real, with Linux Mint, for most people, that's all you have to do. I mean, I'm not lying, that's really all you have to do. Why? Because this is, and anybody who uses Linux Mint, please chime in, but this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love Linux Mint, because they provide a lot of what everybody needs. For example, I already have LibreOffice installed. I don't have to go and install it. I already have GIMP installed by default. I have a screenshot tool already installed. I have also a simple scanning software already installed. And so there's already a lot of things installed for you by default that you don't have to go out and get. Thunderbird is already installed for your email clients, okay? And so for Linux Mint, I really feel that you don't have to do a lot after that, okay? If you just do your system updates and your driver updates, you're ready to go for the majority of people. Now, some other things that you might want to do after that, and this really depends on you, what your needs are. You would go into the software manager and kind of look and see what software is available, okay? So you would go under administration, then just open up your software manager, you know, and then kind of see the different categories of stuff. And this is especially true for people who are brand new to Linux. They might not be real familiar with what's available. And the good thing is with Linux software managers, it's very similar to the whole Apple App Store and Google Play Store experience. And if anything, Linux was first to have this type of experience. You know, anybody could correct me if I'm wrong, but this whole thing of like going to a centralized place, our software manager, the repositories, before you use the Synaptic Package Manager, this was actually, this was actually what was done before Apple iPhone ever came out, before Android ever came out. Okay, so let me answer some questions here. Okay, software. Okay, so Rose asked, I just switched distro to MX16. It seems great, no problems yet. Awesome. Clayton said sudo pacman-syu. Awesome. And then Carr says, I think my hardware is failing. I can't keep my laptop on longer than 20 minutes before it heats up and turns off. Windows started that in Windows 8. Wow. So Carl, are you having that problem with Windows, or just with Linux, or just in general your computer just turned off? Because I have some old machines here. I don't know if you've seen a previous episode. I did an episode about Windows licenses versus Linux licenses. Okay, with Linux, yes. And I've had that issue before. Mainly mine was a hardware issue. Okay, but there are some instances where, depending on the distro you have, there might be some incompatibilities with the actual hardware that you had. And so let me check real quick, because I think my phone is about, okay, I got some time left on here. So let me get something real quick. So check this out. This is my old laptop. Okay, oh, real old one. This is my Dell D8 180. I'd have to charge it, but this is from 2005. It actually had Windows, at the time it was Windows 7, and then I upgraded, Windows 7. I'm sorry, it had Windows 7, and then I put Linux Mint on this, and I had it since Linux Mint Olivia, and it still works. The only problem is I accidentally damaged the screen, and so you can still see it, but the screen is messed up. I accidentally stepped on this computer. So Linux Mint still runs it, Linux Mint Olivia, and this is from 2005. And so I know that with Linux, you know, it's so much more versatile. Okay, and going back to everything that was said earlier about the question that what do you need to do when you install Linux Mint? Besides the system updates, device manager, go into your software manager. You know, if you're brand new to it, just kind of look around. You know, look at what's featured. There's different categories. And I know you can't see it here, but if you go to your software manager, Linux Mint has done a great job of organizing things. So you could see some software that there's ratings on there as well. And these are all stored in the repository. So all this software has been vetted. Okay, and I don't remember a time where a program was uploaded to repositories that had like malicious things, you know, whether it's malware or viruses. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been using Linux for a decade now, and I've never had that experience. Okay, and you know, if you're using the App Store or the Google Play Store, we know that malicious programs can get in there. Okay, but at least with Linux Mint and the Ubuntu repositories, I've never run into that. So for the most part, I think like 99%, if you're coming here and you're looking at software to install, you can be assured that it's safe, okay, and it's vetted. Okay, so that's what I would do. And so the two main ones, do first system updates, driver, and then the third one, kind of look and see what software that you might want to install. And I think that's about it for people who, one of the first things that you should do in Linux Mint. And within Linux Mint and any other Linux distros, what you want to do your system, it's absolutely limitless. And so I don't think there's like a de facto, here's the steps you do for every single Linux distro. That's simply not possible. But I think in general, for every Linux distro, Linux Mint or not, system updates, drivers, and then go to your software manager and kind of see what's available. I think that's across the board. Now, beyond that, I can't think of anything else. I mean, if there's any other people who had any ideas on that, that would be cool as well. So let me see if there's any other comments here. So, so Carl had that problem with Linux, yes. And then it was doing it to Windows 2, not doing better. Got better with Linux, and it's now doing it again. Yeah, and you know I had a similar issue, Carl, with not that laptop, but I had another laptop where it would shut down, or when I tried to suspend put it into hibernate, it wouldn't come back up. Okay, and the fix for that was I found out that it was something to do at that time. This is years ago. The version of Linux that I had, the kernel that I had on there had issues with the hardware that I had. And so what I did was I updated it. I didn't update, I'm sorry. I installed a brand new version of Linux which had a newer kernel, and I guess that fixed the problem for me, at least at that time, with that version of Linux that I had on there. And I can't remember, I don't remember if it's Linux Mint or it was KDE, Ubuntu. You know, and that was a long time ago. But I have experienced that before. Maybe not exactly, but I've had problems with that before. And normally it's the drivers with the version of the drivers with the hardware that you have. And so I don't know if that'll help. Now, other things in Linux, I'm actually going to be doing more, as much as possible, more Linux gaming episodes as well. A lot of the game reviews that I do, they are retro. And so for all of you out there who actually watch some of my gaming episodes, I really appreciate it, because that's something that I've loved since I was a kid. And me and my brothers, you know, we talk a lot about video games, okay? And I think if you're a geek, you're normally going to like video games as well. And so what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start doing more Linux games as well. Maybe nowhere near as much as my retro games, but on Steam, there's more Linux games available. And so hopefully I'll be able to bring y'all more Linux related games for people who are interested. And so far, I am very satisfied with my experience on Linux for gaming. You know, and if I just go into Steam and fire it up, I don't have any problems. And so I'm very impressed by it. Okay, so Carl says, okay, Joe Collins has a video on updating or downgrading the kernel. I would try that. Yes. And you know, for all of you who are not familiar with what Carl is talking about, if you're kind of new to the whole Linux space, Joe Collins, he is my favorite Linux channel, period. I've been watching him for years. And let me see, I think it's called Easy Linux. You know, that his is my favorite channel. I absolutely love his channel. And let me talk a little bit about other YouTube channels, because, you know, I think they're very important for, you know, for you to learn from these people who have been using Linux, and also that shares their point of view on Linux. Okay, so if you type in Joe Collins, I think it's Easy Linux. Oops, I didn't type that right. So Joe Collins Linux. Yeah, Joe Collins Linux. Yeah, so Joe Collins Linux. His actual image, it says Easy Linux. His channel is awesome. He has like 331 videos, but his videos, I've learned so much from his videos. He's done amazing content, really long form content that actually goes into detail. Everything from real general user stuff to even really advanced Linux things. You know, I can't remember some of the things that I've watched on here. I learned things from partitioning to encryption. He talks about server stuff too as well, if I can remember correctly. You know, it's endless how many things that he talks about. So if you want to learn a lot about Linux, I recommend that you go to Joe Collins' channel. He is my favorite channel. I myself, I am not a Linux channel specifically, but obviously you know that I love Linux as well. And so I really enjoy Joe Collins if you want to learn a lot about Linux. Okay, so other than that, I don't think there was anything else that I really had in mind. If y'all had anything, other subjects you want to talk about, Linux or not, you could post that comment before I actually end this episode. And so far, I think in the whole Linux space, the only other news that I remember was there's a new version of Debian. I think there's Debian 9 that was just released. And I am not much of a distro hopper myself, and so I can't talk too much about that. So Rose says, Joe Collins, Lenny, yes, sudo-ec are great. Yes, completely agree with all of it. I enjoy Lenny's videos. He's got like a real funny drive sense of humor as well, but you could learn a lot from his channel. Okay, so I think it's been over an hour now for this episode. This feels a lot more like my Geek Bros Talk episodes with my brothers. I really highly recommend that all of you, if you have not seen those episodes, go check it out. You know, me and my brothers, we have a great time doing that. We're not only talking to each other, but you know, we're talking to you as well. And so in this case, you know, as I think I stated last week, these live videos is more between me and then the audience right here. So we're having a discussion here. This is very similar to the Geek Bros Talk episodes that I do with my brothers. Instead of talking with my brothers, I'll be talking to all of you geeks out there as well. So I just, once again, no problem, Rose. Thanks, Geek Outdoors. Thank you for all of you for being on these videos. I can't express enough how thankful I am for all of you not only watching my channels and subscribing, but also adding so much to this Geek Outdoors and the whole geek and tech community. Thanks, Carl. You rock. Awesome. Y'all rock too. For all of you adding to this community, you know, and I myself, being a content creator, being someone who has never really done anything like this before, when I first started this, it was like I did like, this is something a little different, but I did something like 38 videos in like 2 years. I only had 4 subscribers, 4 or 5, and it's not the number of subscribers that you think about. I bet I don't rock that you don't see there. You know, where it's like a reflection of your content, and then you're seeing what value it provides. And so I did about 38 videos in 2 years. I had like 5 subscribers and like 200 something views in all 38 videos. And honestly, I actually wanted to give up. Okay, I just wanted to stop. And on top of it, if you want to do YouTube just to make money, not a good idea. At least not for the short term. For the long term, you could make money. And so with both of those things being in there, like nobody's watching, I had no subscribers, nobody's getting value out of it, at least that I saw. And on top of it, I'm like, I'm spending all this time, but I'm not even making a penny. Okay, so on both fronts, it made you want to quit. And so in 2015, I tried it again, and this time I'm like, okay, let me really focus on this, and maybe somebody out there, at least one person, will get value out of this somewhere in the world. And I really wanted to focus on being a geek, and the whole point of me doing that was I wanted to find other geeks. You connect with other geeks, and that's what platforms like YouTube provides. And so when people started watching, and then people started subscribing, people started contributing, and then now we're up to this point, and there are way more things to come, and we're having these discussions. This is awesome. This is why I absolutely love doing this. And of course, all the other things will come along with it. You know, the business end of it, the monetary end, and also at the same time, you know, sharing information. So Rose says, you get value, decides to use Linux now, still a newbie. Thanks, Rose. And that's the whole point. That's why I absolutely love doing this, is because whenever you are a content creator, okay, and this is just a personal thing from myself, right? When you are a content creator, you are creating things out of your ideas. You are sharing yourself with the world. And that is an absolutely terrifying thing, because you don't know these people, right? You don't know there's like 7 billion people in the world, okay? So you are sharing yourself with people that you don't know. And on top of it, you don't know if people value what you're doing. And so whenever it gets to the point where people get value out of it, it makes you want to create more value. And it is so much fun. And so I'm probably going to be saying that every single episode. And then whenever you create content and you see these other content creators, YouTubers or people on Instagram, wherever it might be, and they're like, thank you, you know, they really mean it. Because if you remember back to when you started, and I don't think any of these YouTubers, whether they have 1 million, 12 million subscribers and billions of views, they all remember what it was like when they started, because all of them started at 0, and none of this would be possible. And I know it sounds cliche, but if you don't have people who value what you do, who are watching it, who are contributing to it, then all of this stuff that we have, it is just absolutely just data sitting on a server. And this is, I've been in IT, so I know what that's like when you're not getting any interaction with whatever you have on your servers. It's just data on a server, and it means absolutely nothing. Okay, so Clayton says, you are one of the people that convinced me to convert to Linux. No problem, Clayton. And Carl said, me too. Yeah, and this is another thing that's awesome, right? Okay, so you're doing this, right? And you're experiencing this. So imagine now you have somebody like Clayton or Carl. They watch your video just like I did when I watched Joe Collins. And then that inspired you to go try it and to learn it. And now when we're interacting with each other, I'm like, oh man, that's what I experienced when I first started. You know? And back when I started, which was, I'm positive, it's like the year 2000. Yeah, I think so. 2000 or 2002, I can't remember, but my very first experience was Red Hat Linux. I've talked about that before. And then, we didn't have anything like this back then. We didn't have YouTube, you know, we didn't have the internet as it is today. And so a lot of what you were learning, it's a lot of trial and error. You would break a lot of things. And then it was hard for you to go share that with anybody else because 99% of the population, especially back then, the year 2000, 2002, nobody knew anything about Linux. Like what? What's Linux? You know, and it wasn't until Ubuntu came out in 2005 and then we had the internet, we had YouTube, that we're able to share these things. And what did Rose say? I'm now telling people to move to Linux. Exactly, that's what happened to me, and I watch your videos and others. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna close this episode off. It's probably turning into an absolute Linux love fest, but I do appreciate everything that the whole community, all of you watching, all of you contributing, and also I always would love for all of you to help share the information of Linux. Okay, all of us are, if we have not been Linux users for a while and we just started, I think all of you end up being the same. In the end, you end up really loving Linux. And not just Linux, you actually appreciate the community. You, not only open source, but even proprietary, because whenever you use Linux, it opens up a whole new world. I think you learn to appreciate more of the software that's being created, the communities that are there. And when I was using Windows, I did have some of that, but nowhere near as much as when I use Linux. Okay, if I were to create a Windows only channel, I guarantee you I wouldn't have the same passion, and I don't think I would have the same type of interaction and contribution that I did if I didn't talk about Linux. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you did get value out of these videos, leave a like and subscribe. And if you wanted to support my channel further, you can do that at patreon.com/Geek Outdoors, and I'll see you on another live episode.